Hey everyone, how are you all doing today? In today's video, we're going to be creating a little mini project. We're going to be making a pin cushion. So here I have my pin cushion. What's special about this pin cushion is we've been practicing different types of stitches, and each side of this pin cushion has a different stitch. So our first side is going to have our running stitch. The second side is going to show our back stitch, followed by our blanket stitch, and then finally a whip stitch. We're also going to be I'll show you how to sew on a button again, and we'll be able to create this nice little pin cushion that you have that you can place your pins in. I just dropped that one. Place your pins in, your needles, and you can hold on to that. All right, let's get started. All right, so to get started for today's video, we're going to start off with our worksheet. On this worksheet, again, we have that template that we're going to be using to trace out our pin cushion. I like to use scissors that I don't use for thread or any sort of fabric. These are just scissors that I have on my desk that I use for paper. So I'm going to go ahead, start off cutting that out. Making sure to cut right on that line. Okay. So now that I have my template cut out, I can go ahead and start tracing that onto my fabric. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be using blue fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and take that, and lucky enough, this is a square, so we can line that up right here. And then I like to use a flat ruler for something like this. This way I'm able to push it right up along the edge. And I'm going to take my fabric pencil, and I'm going to go and just trace that right onto my fabric. Line that up right on the edge. Take my pencil and trace that out. So now I'm going to need two pieces like this because there's a front and a back to my pin cushion. So again, I'm just going to slide that down here. Line that up. Trace that way. One more that way. So now I have my two pieces traced out, and I can go ahead and cut those. For this, I'm going to be using my sewing scissors. So now that I have my two pieces cut out, I can go ahead and move on to the next step, which would be to pin my two pieces together. So I'm going to start off by just laying them one on top of the other, lining up the sides as neat as possible. I'm going to go ahead, take my pin cushion, grab some pins. Right up along the edge, I'm going to push down, back up again, and I'm going to complete that for each of the four sides of my pin cushion. So I'm going to push down, back up. This is what it looks like from the front and from the back. Using the pins is just going to ensure that my fabrics don't shift while I'm sewing, and as I sew each row, I'll be able to take the pins out. And there we go. Okay. So now I can move on to start sewing. So today I'm going to be using an orange thread, so it's nice and easy for everyone to see while I'm completing this. Each side of this pin cushion is going to have a different stitch. This way we can practice using each stitch. So I can go ahead, measure an arm's length of thread. Cut that off. And one more time, I'm going to take that thread, push it through the eye of my needle, pull the ends together, wrap that around my finger 2 times, and roll off and pull. And that gives us our knot. So now for a project like this, we don't want our knot visible at all Typically we would go right from the back and then our knot would be on the back side. But since we don't want that knot visible, we're gonna go ahead and insert our needle in between the two pieces. This way when I pull that up, I'm able to tuck my knot inside and you will not see it from either side once it's sewn together. So for the first side, we're going to complete a running stitch. Starting here, we're going to work that across till we reach the end of this section of the square. So again, to do the running stitch, I'm up, I move over a tiny bit, a stitch length, push through the back of my fabric, and then I'm going to flip over, go over in the opposite direction a tiny bit, push through, pull up, just like this. I'm going to go over a smidge, stitch length, and then come back up a stitch length over. If it's easier for you to flip your work each time, you can absolutely do so. So right here, my thread got caught into my needle, so all I do is I take the back of my needle, I'll pull that over, and then just pull gently, and it should work right out. Going in and out, following the directions. If you're having a problem completing your running stitch, remember on our instruction sheet, I included the instructions for each of the stitches that we would be completing for this blanket. So please reference that if you need. There are also step-by-step instructions on the second page that shows you what to do for each side. So I'm going to go ahead, continue this row, and I'll meet you back at the end of the show to show you how to do that finishing knot. So now I'm coming up to the end of that first row. I just have a few more stitches to complete. Okay, so now to complete my finishing knot for this project, what I'm gonna do is, instead of pushing through and making my knot on the back side, I'm going to only put my needle through one of those pieces of felt and pull. Now my thread is coming out through the middle. I'm gonna pull that open a little bit, and I have that little stitch right in there. I'm gonna go ahead, scoop that stitch up with my needle and complete my finishing knot as normal. So I'm holding onto that loop, I wrap it around 2 times, and I pull, 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 and that tightens everything together. And now my first row is sewn together. Go ahead and cut that off, and I can move on to our next row. So for our next row, we're going to be completing a back stitch. So again, I'm going to go ahead, cut my thread my needle, and I can go ahead and get started. So just like the last row, instead of starting from the very back, I'm going to insert my needle in between those two stitches, 2 pieces of fabric to start this side, tuck in that knot. This way it is hidden. So to remember, to start our back stitch, we're going to move over 1 space, push through as if we're completing a running stitch, move forward 1 stitch space, come back up, and now we can begin our back stitch and move back 1 stitch length and go through both pieces of fabric and pull. So now I'm going to move forward 1 stitch length, push through, and go back to the hole of my last stitch. So to continue, I'm going to go ahead, turn back, move forward 1 stitch length. When I come up, I always want to make sure that I'm lining up my next stitch with my last one to achieve that nice straight line at the end. I'm going to go right back through both pieces. Once I come up to about there, I like to take my pin out. If you want to leave your pin in longer, you're more than welcome to. It's all just what works for you, what's comfortable for you, and how you're best going to be able to finish your product. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row, and I'll meet you back when it's time to do the finishing knot. Okay, so I just completed my last stitch. So just like the last one, I'm only going to bring my thread up through one side in between those two. So once I put my needle through here, I'm going to scoop under that stitch that's right in between and complete my finishing knot as normal. Go ahead, cut off that extra, and now I have two sides completed for my pin cushion. All right, so to continue, we're gonna do our next side of our pin cushion, which we're gonna finish with a blanket stitch. So I'm gonna go ahead, get my needle threaded. Just like everything else that I've been doing for this, I'm going to be inserting my needle in between the two pieces of fabric. Pulling that through and tucking that knot on the inside. So I can go ahead and continue to make my blanket stitch. And remember, if you don't remember how to do this, you're going to go one space over, come up through the back, make a loop right there, put your needle right through that, and pull. And that gives us that nice finished look on the top there. So again, I'm going to go one space over from the back. Remember, you want to keep your spaces one stitch length apart, make a loop, and go right back over, just like so. Those instructions are also right on your instruction sheet. If you need to reference them, you can follow that if you're having a hard time. Okay. So I can go ahead and pull that pin out now. Right. So one more time, I'm going to hold onto that thread. I'm going to poke my needle up through the back, 1 stitch length further, pull onto that loop, come back, put my needle through, and just pull it together. And we end up with something that looks just like that. I'm going to go ahead, finish this row, and I'll meet you back to make that knot. So now I'm ready to make that finishing knot. So again, I'm going to go right in between the 2 pieces of fabric, scoop up that stitch that's right there, wrap it around 2 times, and pull slowly. And that knot is formed right on the inside of the 2 pieces of fabric. I can go ahead, cut my extra, and now I have 3 complete sides of my pincushion. The next side, we're going to be finishing off with a whip stitch. For the next and final side, we want to make sure that while we're sewing this, we're going to start on the left side, work towards the right, and we're going to stop when we have a finger's gap left, about a centimeter sized hole, so we can stuff our pincushion. So now that I have my needle threaded, I can go ahead and insert my needle right in between those 2 pieces of fabric and tuck in the knot. And I can go ahead and start making my whip stitch. To do the whip stitch, you're just going to move over. You're coming from the back each time, moving over 1 stitch length each time. Zoom in a little bit there for you. All right, so I'm just going to do that. Remember, if you're having a hard time completing your whip stitch, you can feel free to look at the instruction sheet, and we have all of the instructions written there. So I'm going to continue until I have that finger's length left. All right, so I just finished making my whip stitch. So I have a 1 finger space left. What I like to do now is I'm going to take that, pull that open a little bit. Those stitches are going to become a little loose. That's completely fine. Once you pull after, you'll be able to tighten everything right back up. So now here I have some fluff. I'm going to use little bits of this at a time, only about that much at a time. I'm going to go ahead, push that right on top, and I like to use the back of a pencil to push that into place. So again, I'm only going to be taking little pieces at a time, pushing it right on that hole, and then using the back of my pencil to stuff. I like to use little pieces of stuffing at a time, just because I find when you use bigger pieces, it can become more lumpy. The smaller the pieces, I find generally the better of an overall fluff you'll have. We're going to be stuffing this so it's pretty firm. It's a pin cushion, so it's not going to be super soft like a pillow would be, but we don't want to make it rock hard either. So I'd say once you start feeling that it's getting pretty hard to put anything else in there, you're just about done. I'll show you what it feels like after I finish stuffing. Okay, so I just finished stuffing my pin cushion. As you can see, when I push on it, it's pretty stiff, but it still has a little bit of bounce back. So now I can go ahead, move forward, and sew that closed. So as I said before, when I opened up the hole, those stitches came loose. As soon as I pull it, it comes right back. I also like to take that stuffing that's right on the tip and push it down a little bit. I can redistribute the fluff after I finish sewing everything up. So again, we're just moving over 1 stitch length, coming up through the back each time. Zoom in a little there for you until we come to the end. All right, now that I've I've reached the corner. When I come back up, I'm only going to come up through the back piece of fabric. I'm going to go ahead. This one you have to try to find right in the middle. You'll be able to grab onto one of those stitches. And make that finishing knot. Okay, and there you go. So the last thing that I'm going to want to do for this pincushion is to sew a button right in the middle here. So I'm just going to I just threaded up my needle, and then I can go ahead and start sewing on that button. So I want my button to be sewn right here. So I'm going to go ahead, take that off, pull that in and out one stitch. And here we go. So I have that. I can go ahead, take my needle now, drop that right on, and that should line up nicely. So now remember, when we sew on a button, I like to work in a crisscross way. So since I came up from the top left, I'm going to be going in through the bottom right. For this, I like to go all the way through and try to come up as close to the middle as possible. So I'm going to hold that in place for the first couple stitches, and I'm going to pull tight. I pull tight this way, it flattens out my pillow a little bit. So now from here, since I came down from the bottom right, I'm going to come up to the top right. Up like that. And then since I came up through the top right, I'm going to go down from the bottom left. Again, pushing that needle as close to the middle as possible. If you're a little off, that's completely okay. Just like that. And now I'm going to repeat that 3 or 4 times until my button is secured in place. So we go from the top left to the bottom right. And then from the top right to the bottom left. So that was 3. This is my 4th time around, which will also be my last time. All right, so now I'm going to come back up, but this time I'm not going to come through any of the buttons. I'm going to come right from the side underneath the button and not through one of the holes. I'm here going to wrap my thread around 3 times. What this does is it anchors our button in place so it will not move. And now I can go ahead, pull that to the side, and I have all of those stitches in there. I'm just gonna scoop one of them up and go ahead and make my finishing knot. Yeah, pull. So I can go ahead and cut that off. And there we go. Now we have a button that's sewn on. After I do this, I like to just move my fluff around, redistribute everything to where it is, and there we go. We have a little pin cushion. All right, well, that's our pin cushion. I hope you guys had fun. And remember, if you had any problems or if you think you're gonna have problems, feel free to review any of the other videos that I've posted that review each of the stitches that we've done, except for the whip stitch. Again, it's nice. This is a nice pin cushion to have. It shows you 4 of the stitches that we've learned. If you just have to reference, I like to reference to see what stitches look like sometimes, just to see which one's going to look the best on whatever project I'm working on at that time. And of course, we have our button in the middle with that X design. This is the design that I like, but you're more than welcome to do the square design or just 2 parallel or horizontal lines. I hope you guys had fun. I hope you enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to seeing what your pin cushions come out as. Have fun. Bye.